Hello, in today's video we're going to take a look at a 1965 Danelectro model DM10. The DM10 is a small amplifier with a single 8-inch speaker. It has two inputs, a volume, a tone, and it has tremolo with strength and speed, a little indicator light, and on-off switch on the front. If we flip it around, we will see the kind of tubes it uses. We have a 6x4 rectifier, which is a fairly standard little rectifier that Danelectro used a lot. This is a little 7-pin rectifier. We also have here's the cap can. This is a Planet cap can, and this one again has a date code of 1965. Here's a 12AX7. I believe this is the Tremolo 12AX7. Here's a single 6V6 on the output and a 12AX7 input, providing two stages there. We've got a little tiny output transformer there, probably one of the tiniest I've seen on a Danelectro, just about. Also a really small power transformer, but they seem to do the job, and we will check this thing out. What we're going to do is go through and service it. Add the three-prong cord. We'll see how that was all added, and take a look at the guts and see what needs to be changed or what doesn't need to be changed. Here we are with the back panel off the amp, and we were actually missing a couple of screws that's holding this chassis shelf up. This thing is basically just floating freely, and is attached to the back door to kind of keep the chassis held up. So weird design. Not something I don't think you would see many manufacturers do today, but I guess they got away with it back then. But, here's a little 8-inch speaker. It's a Jensen special design. Looks like a C8T, perhaps. There's a little code there, 3105 on the baffle board, which again is like a masonite. There we see the chipboard on the bottom as well, and up on the top. This little back door is more like it's almost like a glorified cardboard. It's like I don't know what kind of board you would call that, but it's not very sturdy stuff. The Jensen looks like it's in good shape. I can't really hardly make out the code. Looks like maybe 510, so maybe the 10th week of 1965. The code I can make out is on the cap can up here, and it is 27th week of 1965 there on the bottom. And that's a Planet cap can. That's original. No idea what that code means. That's probably a part number. And I don't see a code on the power transformer, but those are definitely original to the amp. I don't see any signs of those having been removed at all at any point. You know, often when I'm making these little videos, I'll run across something that I may term as novel or interesting, and here's another one of those things. And usually when I say that, I'm saying it somewhat facetiously. This is this is the method by which they were holding in the chassis in this cabinet. As you can see here, this whole thing once again is kind of flaps loose, and the chassis faceplate is up there. And the way it was held in is with these little blocks with a screw in them. There's one on this side that goes in like that, and then there's another one that's not out yet over on this side. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the textbook definition of novel right there. What a way of keeping the amplifier in the cabinet. To put a couple little pieces of wood in there to hold it in. And this is stuff that this is something that you have to keep up with if you work on this thing. This little block of wood that's going to hold your chassis in your amplifier. Yeah, so chalk this up to stuff you could not get away with in the 21st century, probably. But this is kind of par for the course for the time. This is what companies like Danelectro and Valco to perhaps a lesser extent, and other companies were trying to do to have product and get it out the door quickly and have something they could sell. But this is just a weird way of mounting a. I mean, it's perfectly stable when you have both of those in there, those little blocks of wood, and then you have this back door on properly. When I got this, though, it didn't have the 3 screws. You really need these 3 screws to hold this all stable. But without it, it's just it's just going to come right out. But what an interesting and novel, wink wink, way of holding a chassis into an amplifier. So yeah, wanted to show you that before we moved on. Okay, here we are inside the amp, and everything's pretty original and pretty clean in here. I don't see any evidence of it having been touched by any previous techs, other than the cord, the power cord, which was cut off and spliced. I don't think anything at all has really been done to this amp. You see there ML3 little sign off for one of the builders. It's got the original electrolytics still. All of these Cornell Dubliner caps are original to the amp for sure. This is what they were using in 1965. All the pots are dated 1965 CTS pots. And there's one the 15th week. One over here the 24th week. Danelectro must have sold a zillion and one amplifiers in the year 1965, because it seems like every time I get a 1960s amp from them, it's 1965. So either they ordered just all their parts in 1965 and then built them for the next 2 or 3 years using those parts, or they just sold a lot of amps in 1965, which makes sense, I guess, since the Beatles hit America in what was it, 64? So that's kind of when the craze began for guitars. So this would have been right at the height of the boom, 1965. We still have the death cap here, which will go. That will be clipped out. So yeah, let's get a 3-prong cord. Let's clip out this death cap. First, I might just plug it in for giggles and test it. I think the customer said the tremolo wasn't working, so I'm assuming we're going to have to change those tremolo caps, and I think it's probably these here, because those are associated with the with this 12AX7, so it's probably these caps here are the trim caps, so we'll probably end up replacing all of those. These Cornell Dubliner caps really don't stand up very well. I haven't had very much luck with them, and I don't know, maybe somebody else out there has, and they might chime in and say, oh, they're the best things ever, but my experience tells me they're not very good caps. At least they haven't held up for 50, 60 years, which most things don't anymore. So I guess by modern standards, they're good caps. So anyway, let's test it out, see what exactly is wrong with it while we have it open, and we can put some test leads and things in here if we need to, and see where we're at. Okay, I brought this little Danelectro up on a Variac now. I've got the 3-prong cord installed, and it's all up and operating. The the tube sockets are clearly pretty dirty and need to be cleaned. You can wiggle the tubes, and there's a lot of crackling going on. I had to tighten down a couple of the input jacks because they were really loose. The switch was really loose as well. I have not yet cleaned any of the pots, but at least the tremolo needs to be cleaned, and I'm just going to go ahead and clean all of them as well. But everything is actually working just fine. and even the electrolytics seem okay. Everything tests out good. Everything's holding, the electrolytics are holding a nice charge. I'm not even going to recommend to the customer I even replace those. They probably have a lot of life still left in them. As long as he plays this thing fairly regularly and doesn't mistreat it, he's probably going to be okay with those electrolytics even. And I just don't like replacing parts that don't need to be replaced. And it's one of those things where it's kind of his decision. I'll contact him about it, but I wouldn't recommend replacing those. They probably have a lot of life left in them, and he may just say to leave them in. So, but at any rate, everything does work. The tremolo even works. Speed works. Of course, I'm just doing hammer-ons because I have this camera in my other hand, but I think a good cleaning on all the pots and all of the sockets, and we can pretty much wrap this one up. Okay, before we do anything else, let's take a look at the schematic for this thing. Pretty straightforward, no real surprises here. Again, we've got the 6x4 rectifier, which is the 7-pin variety. Everything looks pretty much standard as far as that goes. The tremolo has an interesting affect to it. It kind of almost sounds like a rotary effect, especially on the high speed of the tremolo. We can see that it's actually, what's happening is it's varying the output bias of the 6v6. The 6v6 is actually biased, it looks like, with two different series resistors here, and then that resistance is changed via the tremolo circuit. So that's what's going on as far as the tremolo. And this output tube is also unbypassed, we'll see. So there's no bypass cap on that. You could probably add a bypass cap and beef this thing up a little bit. Maybe get some more gain overall out of it, and more output overall, rather, out of it. But I'm not going to do any modifications to it because I've actually already played through it at this point in the video, and I don't think it's going to need really any mods, so I'm not going to bother with that. One thing I will say here that is somewhat unusual, your volume control is actually before the first stage, which is a bit unusual. One other thing to mention, this is the DM10 is apparently the same as the 1449 and 1457 Silvertone model. So if you get a 1449 or a 1457 model Silvertone by Sears Roebuck, it should be the same as the Danelectro DM10. But again, with this 100K volume pot on the input, just a bit unusual. If you were to actually, and the 27K input resistors here are a bit unusual as well. So this volume pot, if you did more of a standard input with maybe say like a 48K into the first grid here, and then brought your volume over here with your tone somewhere before this second stage, you could probably make this a slightly better amp by doing that. Maybe make stick a 1 meg volume pot or a 500K or something like that. Maybe split out the tone to 500 and 500 volume. But the cool thing about different amps is you have these different circuits. You can see how these different circuits operate. It's kind of part of their charm. You could go in here and mod this thing and change it around, but it's in pretty much pristine original condition, with the exception of the 3-prong cord that we're going to put on it. And I just don't think we'd be doing it any favors to start hacking around in here on this thing. Alright, finally to the stage where we can check this little thing out and see what it sounds like. With the volume and everything all the way down, it's pretty much dead quiet. Yeah, let's check it out. For the purpose of this demo, I'll be using a, this is about a 1966 or so, Guyatone Kent LG 130T. Yeah, this guitar actually has a lot of options. So, but really to do it with something a little more familiar, let's check it out with a Strat-like guitar. This is actually a Fernandez. Don't let the shape fool you. It's sort of a Jazzmaster shaped guitar, but it's made in Japan, and it's more or less a Strat. I think all these are in the exact positions as a Strat. All the controls are Stratty. So this is basically a Strat. I'll give you an idea what this thing sounds like with a Strat. Again, usually it helps if you actually tune the guitars before you try to do demos with them, but
So yeah, that's a 1965 Danelectro DM10.